I have worked at Gold and Glory Pawn for 6 years. It sits in a strip mall that has seen better days, wedged tightly between a discount liquor store and a 24-hour laundromat. You get used to the characters in a place like this. You get the regulars who pawn the same circular saw every Friday for beer money and buy it back on Monday at a loss. You get the sad stories, the angry ex-husbands, the desperate college students selling their gaming consoles for rent. But mostly, it is boring. It is just retail with more paperwork and a higher chance of getting yelled at. That changed on a rainy Tuesday in November. The shop was empty, save for the hum of the fluorescent lights and the relentless sound of rain hammering the corrugated metal roof. It was a slow day, the kind where minutes stretch into hours. I was leaning against the back counter, scrolling through my phone, trying to ignore the smell of old dust and stagnant air that permeates every pawn shop. Around 2 p.m., the door chimed. A man walked in. He looked rough, but not in the way our usual homeless clientele looked. It was more like he hadn't slept in 3 days and had dressed in the dark. He was wearing a heavy, dark green parka, which was odd because it wasn't that cold out, maybe 50 degrees. He had a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, obscuring most of his face. He didn't look at the merchandise. He didn't look at the guitars hanging on the wall or the jewelry cases. He walked straight to the counter. He kept glancing at the door behind him, his movements jerky and paranoid. He reached into his deep coat pocket and pulled out a camcorder. It was a Sony, one of those high-end 4K Handycam models that were popular a few years ago, before everyone just started using their phones. It looked pristine. No scratches on the body. The lens was clean. "I need to sell this," he said. His voice was scratchy, like he had been screaming or hadn't spoken in days. "Quick sale. I don't want a loan. Just give me whatever you can." I picked it up. It felt solid, heavy. I popped the battery release. It was a genuine Sony battery, not a knockoff. Usually, people want to haggle. They want top dollar. They give me a sob story about how much they paid for it new. This guy was vibrating with anxiety. I decided to start low. "I can give you $200, I said. It was easily worth $400, maybe $500 on eBay. "Fine," he said immediately. "Just give me the cash." That was the first red flag. No counteroffer? No hesitation? He just wanted to be gone. I told him I needed his ID and I had to test the unit. It is standard policy. We have to make sure it records, plays back, and that the lens mechanism isn't jammed. He got agitated, his dirty fingernails tapping a frantic rhythm on the glass counter. "It works. I just used it. Come on, man. I'm in a hurry." "Store policy," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I can't hand over cash until I verify it functions. It will only take 2 minutes." I took the camera to the back counter where we have a small testing station set up with a TV and various cables. I plugged in the mini HDMI cable. The guy stayed at the front counter, pacing back and forth near the jewelry display. He kept looking out the front window, scanning the parking lot. I assumed he had stolen it and was worried the cops were rolling up. But the serial number hadn't flagged in the police database yet, so technically, my hands were tied. I just wanted to get him out of there. I powered it on and switched the dial to playback mode. The menu screen popped up on our testing monitor. There were dozens of files. I clicked the first one to check the audio and video quality. It played. It was innocent enough. A kid's birthday party in a park. There was a woman laughing, a golden retriever chasing a frisbee. The picture was crisp, the colors vibrant. It looked like the camera belonged to a nice, upper-middle-class suburban family. I figured he had probably burglarized a house in the nice part of town. I stopped the video. Okay, playback works, I muttered to myself. I was about to turn it off when I noticed the timestamps on the file list. The birthday video was from 3 years ago, but there were newer files. A lot of them. The most recent one was from today. Curiosity is a dangerous thing in this line of work, but I couldn't help it. I wanted to see if the thief had accidentally recorded himself. Maybe I'd get a clear shot of his face to give to the cops later. I skipped forward to a file dated 2 weeks ago. The video started with a shot of a parking lot at night. It was grainy, illuminated by orange streetlights. The camera was handheld and shaky. It was filming a car, a red Honda Civic. My stomach dropped. I drive a red Honda Civic. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting. The person filming was sitting in a car, parked 2 spots away from the Honda. In the video, a man walked into the frame, carrying a bag of groceries. He unlocked the Honda and got in. The man in the video was me. I felt a cold prickle of sweat erupt on the back of my neck. I looked up at the front of the shop. The guy was still there, his back to me, pretending to look at a display of pocket knives. I hit the next button on the camera, my fingers trembling slightly. The timestamp was 3 days ago. The angle was different. It was filmed from inside a dark room. Vertical black bars slashed across the image. I realized after a second that I was looking through the slats of a closet door. Through the slats, I could see a bedroom. There was a poster of a vintage band on the wall, a blue duvet cover, a pile of laundry on a chair. It was my bedroom. I watched, frozen in absolute horror, as the video showed me walking into my own room. I looked tired. I kicked off my shoes. I sat on the edge of the bed and took off my socks. The camera zoomed in on my face. The audio picked up the sound of heavy, excited breathing from whoever was holding the camera inside my closet. This man hadn't just stolen a random camera. He had been stalking me. He had been inside my house. He had been watching me sleep. My heart was hammering so hard, I thought he would hear it from across the room. I felt a wave of nausea. I needed to call the police. I needed a weapon. But the phone was under the front counter right where he was standing. My cell phone was charging on the desk next to the register. I was cut off. Then, the guy shouted from the front, "Hey, what is the holdup? Does it work or not?" I jumped, nearly dropping the remote. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it came out higher than usual. Yeah, it works. Just checking the sensor. Give me 10 seconds. I had to know where he was right now. Was he armed? Was he planning to hurt me? I skipped the very last video. Timestamp. Today, 20 minutes ago. The video showed the front of my pawn shop. The camera panned across the street, zooming in on the front door. The rain was visible in the shot. Then, the camera turned around. The person filming flipped the LCD screen, so they were recording themselves. It was the man standing at my counter. But in the video, he wasn't wearing the hat. His hair was greasy and matted. His eyes were wide and manic. He was smiling. A wide, toothy, unnatural grin that showed too much gum. He brought the microphone close to his lips and whispered, "He is alone today. No guard. The door is unlocked. I am going to use the hammer." I looked at the live feed from the security camera monitor above my desk. The man at the counter was slowly unzipping his heavy parka. His hand was reaching inside the coat, moving toward his belt line. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. Survival instinct took over. I grabbed the large canister of bear mace we keep under the testing desk for emergencies. I also grabbed the panic button on my keychain, jamming my thumb down on it. I vaulted over the back counter just as he pulled a rusted claw hammer from his jacket. He screamed a sound of pure, animalistic rage and lunged at me. He was fast, faster than he looked. He swung the hammer, and it smashed into the glass jewelry case right where my head had been a second before. Shards of glass exploded outward. "You watched?" He screamed. "You weren't supposed to watch." I raised the canister and sprayed the mace directly into his face. The stream hit him square in the eyes and open mouth. He howled, dropping the hammer and clawing at his face. He fell back, crashing into a rack of acoustic guitars, bringing them down in a cacophony of wood and wire. I didn't wait to see if he was incapacitated. I ran. I scrambled toward the back of the shop, fumbling with the heavy iron bar on the fire exit. I could hear him behind me, blindly thrashing, knocking over shelves, screaming threats that made my blood run cold. "I know where you sleep. I'll come back. I'll cut your eyes out." I got the door open and burst out into the rainy alleyway. I didn't stop running until I was inside the laundromat next door, locking the door behind me and screaming for the attendants to call 911. The police arrived 4 minutes later. They found him in the alley, trying to wash the mace out of his eyes with a puddle of rainwater. He was still screaming my name. The investigation revealed the true depth of the nightmare. He hadn't just been stalking me for a few days. He had been living in the crawl space of my apartment building for a month. The police found a sleeping bag, empty food wrappers, and jars of urine right above my bedroom ceiling. They found a small hole drilled through the drywall of my closet where he had inserted the camera lens. He had hours of footage. Me sleeping, me eating, me watching TV. He had been a silent ghost in my life, waiting for the perfect moment to make his movie end. I don't work at the pawn shop anymore. I couldn't go back there. I couldn't stand behind that counter, wondering who was walking through the door. I moved to a different state. I don't own a red Honda, and every single night, before I can close my eyes, I check the closets. I check under the bed. I check the locks. But even then, sometimes, just as I'm drifting off, I hear the phantom sound of a camera shutter clicking in the dark. You see a different side of humanity when you work the graveyard shift at a 24-hour pawn shop. The desperate sunlight crowd is replaced by the shadows. It is mostly people needing gas money to get out of town, addicts looking for a fix, or insomnia-driven browsers who just want to talk to someone. You learn to keep your guard up. You learn to read eyes. I was working the shift alone around 3 a.m. on a Thursday. The shop was quiet. The only sound the low hum of the vending machine and the occasional car passing by on the wet street outside. I was reading a book, trying to stay awake, when the entrance chime rang out. A man walked in. He was wearing a suit. Not a cheap suit either. It was tailored, navy blue, expensive fabric. That is rare for 3 a.m. Usually it is sweatpants or grease-stained work uniforms. He looked polished, but his energy was wrong. He was sweating despite the air conditioning. His eyes were bloodshot, darting around the room, checking the corners, checking the cameras. He walked up to the bulletproof glass partition. "I have something valuable," he said. His voice was tight, controlled. "I need cash. Large bills. No questions." He slid a ring through the metal transfer drawer. I pulled it back and picked it up. My breath caught in my throat. It was incredible. A platinum band, heavy and cool to the touch. In the center was a massive emerald-cut diamond, easily 3 carats, flanked by 2 deep blue sapphires. It caught the light and fractured it into 1,000 rainbows. But the most distinct thing was the inscription inside the band. I used my loupe to read it. "My forever A and J minus 2012. It is worth 10 grand. he said fast. He was drumming his fingers on the metal counter. I will take 2, cash. That is a massive red flag. When someone wants 20% of the value, it means the item is hotter than the sun. It means it is stolen. But I am not a cop. My job is to buy low and sell high. And legally, if I take his ID and file the police report, I am covered. I can't do $2,000 cash at 3 a.m., I said, watching his reaction. Safe is on a time lock. I can do 800. I expected him to walk. Instead, he didn't even blink. Fine, do it. Hurry. I wrote up the ticket. He handed me a driver's license that looked legitimate. Name was James Miller. The photo matched. I handed him the cash, $800.20. He grabbed the stack, shoved it into his pocket without counting it, and practically ran out the door. I put the ring in a velvet bag and dropped it into the drop safe behind me. Then I sat back down. Something felt wrong. The guy was too intense. The ring was too unique. About an hour later, I was scrolling through news alerts on my phone to kill time. A breaking news banner popped up from a local station. Local socialite found murdered in West Side mansion. I clicked it. The article described a brutal robbery homicide that had happened earlier that night. The victim, Amelia Miller, had been found dead in her home. The police were looking for her husband, James Miller, who had fled the scene. They listed missing items. Top of the list, a custom platinum wedding ring with an emerald-cut diamond and sapphires, inscribed with my forever. I felt sick. The blood drained from my face. The ring was sitting in my safe, right behind me. I had just handed the murderer the cash he needed to run. I immediately picked up the shop phone and dialed the non-emergency police line, but I got put on hold. Typical. I hung up and looked at the article again. At the bottom, it said, "Anyone with information regarding James Miller or the missing items, please contact the dedicated tip line immediately." I dialed the number. A voice answered on the second ring. "Detective Morris, homicide." I explained everything. My voice was shaking. I told him James Miller was just here. I told him I had the ring. I told him I had the surveillance footage of the transaction. "Okay, listen to me carefully," the detective said. His voice was deep, authoritative, and intense. "You are in possession of key evidence in a capital murder case. Do not touch that ring again. Do not let anyone into the shop. I am 5 minutes away. I am driving an unmarked gray sedan. I will come to the side employee entrance to avoid drawing attention. Do you understand?" "Yes," I said. "I understand." "Good. Stay off the phone. Don't call anyone else. We don't want the media getting wind of this yet." I hung up, feeling a sense of relief. I locked the front door, flipped the sign to closed, and waited. 5 minutes later, almost to the second, a gray sedan pulled up to the alley entrance. I watched on the security monitor. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a tan trench coat got out. He looked exactly like a TV detective. He walked to the steel security door and knocked heavily. I looked through the peephole. He held up a gold badge and a leather wallet. "Detective Morris," he said through the steel. "Open up, son." I unlocked the heavy deadbolts and opened the door. He stepped in, bringing the smell of rain and cigarettes with him. He looked serious. He was wearing black leather gloves. "Where is it?" he asked immediately. "In the drop safe," I said. "I can get it." I walked over, spun the dial, and retrieved the velvet bag. My hands were shaking. I handed it to him. He opened the bag, took out the ring, and held it up to the light. He stared at it for a long moment. A strange expression crossed his face, not professional satisfaction, but something closer to greed. He let out a long breath. "Good work," he said. You did the right thing calling this in so fast. We have been chasing this guy all night. He slipped the ring into his coat pocket. I need the surveillance tape too. The hard drive. We need to secure the footage of him entering and leaving. Right, the DVR is in the back office, I said. I led him into the small, cramped back office where the server rack was bolted to the wall. I grabbed a screwdriver and started unscrewing the DVR box from the rack. As I was working, he stood in the doorway, blocking the exit. Did he say where he was going? The detective asked. No, I said, focusing on the screws. Did he mention any names? Any friends? Any family? No, he just wanted the money. He was in a rush. Good, the detective said. He took a step into the room. So, nobody else knows he was here? Just you? Just me, I said, disconnecting the coaxial cables. And nobody knows I am here? You didn't call 911 dispatch? You just called the number in the article? I paused. My hand froze on the screwdriver. Something about the tone of his voice. It was too casual. Too checking the boxes. And why would a homicide detective care if I called dispatch? Wouldn't he want backup? No, I lied, my heart starting to thump against my ribs. I just called the number in the article. Perfect, he whispered. At that exact moment, the landline phone on the cluttered desk rang. It was loud and shrill in the small room. We both stared at it. Don't answer that, he commanded. His voice dropped an octave. It wasn't a request. The caller ID screen lit up. It read, 911 dispatch. I looked at the phone, then at him. He looked at the phone, and his mask slipped. The professional demeanor vanished. His hand moved to his belt, but there was no gun holster there. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a long, slender hunting knife. It wasn't Detective Morris. The news article. I remembered a detail I had skimmed over. Police are looking for the husband and an unknown accomplice. This wasn't the police. This was the cleaner. You should have kept your mouth shut, he growled, lunging at me. I didn't have anywhere to go. I was cornered in the office. I threw the only thing I had, the heavy metal DVR unit. I swung it with both hands like a discus. The sharp metal corner caught him right in the bridge of the nose. He stumbled back, blood spurting instantly, blinding him. He roared in pain and slashed the knife wildly through the air. I didn't wait. I scrambled under the desk, crawling past his legs while he was disoriented. He kicked out, his heavy boot catching me in the ribs, knocking the wind out of me. I gasped, rolling away, and scrambled to my feet in the hallway. He was right behind me. Get back here. I sprinted for the front of the store. I could hear his heavy footsteps pounding on the linoleum. I reached the front door, fumbling with the deadbolt. My fingers felt like clumsy sausages. I could hear him breathing right behind me. I got the lock to turn just as he grabbed my shoulder. I threw my weight against the door, spilling out onto the wet pavement. At that moment, the parking lot flooded with blue and red lights. A real police cruiser, sirens wailing, screeched into the lot, followed by two more. The man in the trench coat saw the cops. He turned and ran back into the shop, heading for the back exit. I collapsed on the sidewalk, gasping for air in the rain. They caught him 2 blocks away, hopping a fence. He wasn't a detective. He was James Miller's brother. They had planned the murder together for the life insurance money. The tip line number in the article? It was a fake. They had set up a dummy website with false contact info, hoping that if anyone found the ring, they would call them instead of the real police. I had fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. If I hadn't thrown that DVR, if that phone hadn't rung at that exact second to warn me, I would have been just another loose end tied up in the back of a pawn shop. I was already annoyed, calculating how much time I was wasting when we cleared the back corner. Underneath a heavy, oil-stained canvas tarp, there was something massive. "Give me a hand with this," Al grunted, yanking the tarp away. It was a deep freezer, an industrial chest freezer, the kind you see in the back of a butcher shop or a basement in the Midwest. It was old, the white enamel yellowed with age and scarred with scratches. It was locked with a padlock that looked like it belonged on a bank vault of heavy, hardened steel master lock that gleamed in the dim light. Al kicked the side of it. It made a solid, dense thud. "Jackpot," he said, wiping grime from his hands. "Even if the compressor is shot, the scrap metal is worth something. But if it works, we can sell this to a restaurant for $1,000 easy." We tried to lift it. It was impossibly heavy. Not just heavy like an appliance, but dense. Dead weight. It took both of us, straining until our veins popped, to inch it onto the dolly. Every time we hit a bump in the pavement, the freezer groaned, a metallic protest that set my teeth on edge. "What is in this thing?" I asked, gasping for air as we finally shoved it up the ramp into the truck. "Bricks?" All laughed, lighting a cigarette. "Hopefully gold bars. Or maybe just a lot of frozen venison. We'll cut the lock when we get it back to the shop." We drove back in silence, the freezer shifting and creaking in the cargo hold behind us. When we got to the shop, we wheeled it into the back storage room. This room is a cavernous space where we keep the inventory that isn't ready for the floor. Yet rows of bicycles hanging from hooks, stacks of amplifiers, boxes of tools. We shoved the freezer into the far corner, wedged between a shelf of power drills and a stack of winter tires. "I'm beat," Al said, checking his watch. "I can't find the bolt cutters anyway. Let's leave it. We'll crack it open tomorrow." So we left it there, a white monolith in the shadows. That was the mistake. We invited it in. The next day was Wednesday. I had the day off, so the shop was Al's problem. I didn't think about the freezer once. I enjoyed my freedom. But when I came in on Thursday morning to open up, the vibe in the shop was off. You know when you walk into a room and the air feels charged? Static electricity and tension. Al was already there, which was rare for him. He was behind the counter, looking through the security logs on the computer. "Morning," I said, putting my coffee down. "You look like hell." "I slept here last night," he muttered, not looking up. "You what? Why?" "Alarm kept tripping," he said. "Emotion sensors in the back room. Every hour, on the hour. The monitoring company called me at midnight. Then at 2 a.m. I got sick of driving down here, so I just slept in the office on the cot. Did you find anything?" "No." He slammed the mouse down. "That's the thing. I'd go back there, turn on the lights, and nothing. Just that damn freezer humming away." I paused. "The freezer is humming?" "Yeah," Al said. "Wait. No. We didn't plug it in, did we?" We looked at each other. A confused silence stretched between us. "I must have plugged it in," Al said, rubbing his temples. "I was tired when we unloaded it. Probably just muscle memory. Anyway, I think we have rats. I found wrappers on the floor this morning. Granola bars from my stash in the break room. And a bottle of water was missing. Rats don't steal water bottles, Al. Big rats," he grumbled. "Look, just go organize the tool wall. I need to deal with these loan tickets." I went to the back room. It was cold. Colder than usual. I walked past the rows of hanging guitars and approached the corner where we had left the freezer. It sat there, silent. I put my hand on the lid. It was cold to the touch. I followed the thick black power cord snaking out from the back of the unit. It was coiled neatly on the floor. The plug was resting on the concrete, 3 feet away from the outlet. It wasn't plugged in. "Ah!" I shouted. "It's not plugged in." "Whatever," he shouted back from the front. "Just leave it. I'll get the bolt cutters later." I stared at the freezer. If it wasn't plugged in, why did Al think he heard it humming? Maybe it was the building's HVAC system. Maybe it was the traffic outside. I dismissed it. I had work to do. But throughout the day, the uneasiness grew. I was pricing a set of socket wrenches near the back, and I swear, I heard a noise. A soft, rhythmic thump, thump, thump coming from inside the freezer. Like a heartbeat. Or a fist gently hitting padding. I stopped and held my breath. Silence. "Hello?" I whispered, feeling like an idiot. Nothing. Just the settling of the building. Friday came, and with it, the smell. It started subtle. A faint whiff of something sweet and sickly when you walked past the break room door. By noon, it was undeniable. It smelled like spoiling meat. Like a raccoon had crawled into the walls and died. Customers were noticing. A lady trying to pawn a sewing machine crinkled her nose and asked if we had a plumbing problem. Al was spraying air freshener like it was holy water. "It's that freezer," he insisted. "The meat inside must have thawed out. It's rotting. We have to open it today. No more excuses. Where are the bolt cutters?" I asked. "I don't know," Al snapped. "I had them on the workbench on Tuesday. They're gone. The rats probably took them." He was joking, but he didn't smile. "Go to the hardware store down the street. Buy a new pair. A big pair. I want that thing open and emptied into the dumpster before we close." I left to get the cutters. When I came back 20 minutes later, the shop was empty. The open sign was still lit, but Al wasn't at the counter. "Al?" I called out. Silence. "Al, stop screwing around." I walked around the counter. His cell phone was sitting on the desk. His coffee was still steaming. A cold dread, heavy and sharp, settled in my stomach. I walked toward the back room. The smell hit me like a physical wall. It was stronger now, ripe, sewage-like, mixed with the metallic tongue of old blood. "Al?" I stepped into the storage room. The motion sensor light flickered on. The room was a maze of shadows. I saw the freezer. The heavy padlock was gone. The hasp was twisted and broken, lying on the floor. "Al, did you get it open?" I walked closer, gripping the new bolt cutters in my hand like a weapon. The lid of the freezer was closed. I reached out and touched the handle. My hand was shaking. I didn't want to look. I expected to find all dead inside, stuffed in with whatever rotting meat was causing that smell. I threw the lid open and scrambled back, gagging. It wasn't a freezer. Not anymore. The interior had been gutted. The machinery, the racks, everything stripped out. The walls were lined with dirty, scavenged foam padding, duct-taped in place to soundproof it. It was a nest. In the corner was a bucket half full of human waste. That was the smell. There was a pile of dirty blankets, gray and matted. There were food wrappers, dozens of them. Empty water bottles. And the walls, the inside of the lid, they were covered in pictures, Polaroids, printed photos. There were pictures of the shop from the street. Pictures of Al unlocking the front door. Pictures of me parking my car. Pictures of me walking into my apartment building. Pictures of me sleeping, taken through my bedroom window. I felt the room spinning. This wasn't just a squatter. This was a predator. Lying in the middle of the blankets was a spiral-bound notebook. I picked it up, my fingers numb. The handwriting was jagged, pressed so hard into the page that the paper was torn in places. Day 1, the air is stale. The ride was bumpy. They don't suspect. Day 4, They keep the room dark. I can hear them talking. The old one is loud. The young one is soft. Day 6. I found the release latch. I can get out when the lights go off. I walked around their shop. I touched their things. I stood behind the old one while he slept on the cot. I could have taken him then. Day 9. I am hungry. The food they have is garbage. I need fresh meat. I dropped the notebook. A sound behind me. It came from the top of the industrial shelving unit, 10 feet up, where we kept the spare tires. I slowly turned around, shining my phone's flashlight up into the gloom. 2 eyes reflected the light. They were wide, unblinking, and feral. A man was crouched on top of the tire stack. He was skeletal, his skin the color of wet ash. He was wearing nothing but a pair of stained boxer briefs. His hair was long and stringy, hanging over his face. He was holding the missing bolt cutters. "You opened my room," he whispered. His voice was like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "You let the cold in. Who are you?" I stammered, backing away. "I am the replacement," he hissed. He launched himself off the shelf. He didn't fall like a human. He fell like a spider, limbs splayed. He landed on a stack of cardboard boxes, crushing them, and rolled instantly to his feet. He was fast, unnaturally fast. He swung the bolt cutters at my head. I ducked, feeling the wind of the heavy steel tool whistle past my ear. It smashed into a glass display case of porcelain figures next to me, shattering it. I ran. I didn't have a plan. I just needed space. I scrambled over a pile of rugs, heading for the front of the shop. "Ow!" I screamed, hoping he was just in the bathroom, hoping he was anywhere. "He can't hear you," the voice rasped from right behind me. "He is part of the collection now." I rounded the corner into the musical instruments section. The man lunged, tackling me around the waist. We crashed into a rack of acoustic guitars. Wood splintered. Strings snapped with high-pitched pings. The smell of him was suffocating rot and sweat and madness. He was on top of me, his bony fingers digging into my throat. He was incredibly strong for someone so thin. I looked into his face. His teeth were filed down. Sharp little points, gray and jagged. He opened his mouth to bite my face. My hands scrabbled on the floor, searching for a weapon. My fingers closed around the neck of a heavy bass guitar. I didn't think. I swung. I brought the solid wood body of the bass down onto the side of his head with everything I had. He grunted and slumped to the side, his grip loosening. I didn't wait to see if he was unconscious. I kicked him away and scrambled to my feet, gasping for air. I ran to the front door, unlocked it, and burst out onto the sidewalk, screaming for someone to call 911. The police arrived in 3 minutes. They went in with guns drawn. They found him in the back, trying to crawl back into the freezer. They found Al, too. He wasn't dead. Not yet. He was bound and gagged, stuffed inside a large wardrobe box in the very back of the room, behind the tires. He had been there since I left to get the bolt cutters. The man had been waiting for us to separate. The investigation revealed the man's name was Elias Thorne. He was a fugitive, wanted in 3 states for home invasions. But home invasion doesn't capture what he did. He didn't just break in. He moved in. He would hide in attics, in crawl spaces, in basements. He would watch families for weeks, learning their routines, eating their food while they slept. When the police searched the freezer, they found a false bottom under the blankets. Beneath it was a kit, scalpels, needles, thread, and a terrifyingly detailed plan written in that notebook. He wasn't just going to kill us. The last entry, dated that morning, read, "The freezer is big enough to keep them fresh." I will start with the old one. I will peel him. I will wear his face. I will run the shop. The customers won't know. I will become Al. We burned the freezer. We didn't sell it. We dragged it into the lot and paid a guy to torch it until it was nothing but black sludge and twisted metal. Al retired a week later. He couldn't step foot in the shop again. I still run the place, mostly because I need the money, but things are different now. We don't buy storage units anymore, and I don't work alone. But the worst part is the silence. When the shop is empty and the traffic dies down, I find myself standing in the middle of the room, holding my breath. I'm listening. I'm listening for the sound of a heartbeat coming from a dark corner. I'm listening for the sound of someone living in the spaces that are supposed to be empty. And that's all for tonight. Remember, the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look just like us. The ones who might even live right next door. If these stories serve as a good reminder to trust your instincts, then show your support and like and subscribe. Hitting that bell means you'll get a warning before the next nightmare begins. Sleep well, if you can.